Hello, and welcome to the DoneJS contributors meeting. Today is Friday, April 7th, 2017. My name is Chasen, and today I'm joined by...
David. Hi, everybody.
Joel, yeah, nice to be here.
Matthew.
Woohoo.
Hey, Nils, nice to be here.
Hey, thanks guys for joining. Let's get into it and start off with our the core team statuses. So I'll go first. This past week, or it was a week ago Friday, that I published the canned goodies blog post about can param and can dparam. And then earlier this week, I also published the community update. And then I finished some work that Robert had started on making the version number on funkunit.com update when we publish new versions, or when you republish the site. And there were a bunch of issues related to the deploy actually working correctly, so I sorted all of those out. So funkunit.com is up to date now. And then I've been working on some blog posts and meetup organizing, that sort of thing. So next week will be a lot of the same for me, and doing what I can to help our DoneJS 1.0 release process and get it announced. So that's me. David, you want to go next?
Yeah, quick again. I paired up with Kevin this week. We got, he's not here. We got ES6 Go coverage working, which is going to be really nice. I'm going to test it out on our client app today and see how well it works and how bad the coverage is. But yeah, so it actually wasn't that big of a change. Huh?
I said it works?
It looks like it, yeah. So it wasn't that big of a change. So we had to just wait for Istanbul to finish that version that does ES6 coverage. And it looks like it's working. It wasn't that big of a change. A lot of the reporting is still the same. So there wasn't anything on the server side that needed to change. The only thing was we needed to put the new instrumenter in. So today I'm going to try and see if it works with Steel and our ES6 code base for a client project. And let's hope it does. But that will be really nice to have that in.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is that a change? Was that a change in testee or where?
Yes, it's before been instrumenting already on the server before sending the JavaScript files. So whenever you load the runner and set coverage as enabled, it automatically instruments every JavaScript file it sends. So you get the report back, and we just had to update that to use the latest Babel Istanbul.
Cool. Could you drop the issue number or issue link in the group chat? I just want to add it to our summary.
Give me 1 second.
So would that be like testee 04? Is this it's not really breaking change necessarily?
It's not. I don't think it's like a
new feature though.
Patch related thing.
It's not really a new feature. It's a bug fix, kind of.
Yeah.
I'll let you figure that out.
I'll send you the.
Cool. Anything else before we move on to the next person?
No, that's it.
Cool. Matthew.
Hey, so I've been working on DoneJS site updates. If you go to DoneJS Next website, let me drop this one to you as well, Jason. There's a DoneJS Next website, which is it's a version of the website that supports DoneJS 1.0. We did release DoneJS 1.0 to NPM, so it's available for people to use. But we just haven't. It's not that much of a secret.
I know.
We just haven't put the site. We haven't released an article, so we're going to be doing those things. But you can go to it, try out the guides using 1.0, and provide any feedback. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's not that big of a secret. I've been sharing the Next website with people who have found issues with the current site and said, we're about to launch this one. Cool. And for next week?
For next week, I'm not sure because we're pretty much done with the site. I mean, there's probably a lot of there's been like a few issues that people have found, so probably fixing a lot of issues.
Cool, sounds good. Okay, I think that's it for the core team. Does anyone have anything before we move on to topics they want to share? Nope. Okay, Matthew, I think you were the only one who posted a topic. So do you want to bring up the minimal production loader and observable list templates?
Yeah. So I started trying to do this RFC process in Steel. We don't really have one for DoneJS yet. Maybe we will in the future. But just kind of a way to talk about issues that are probably more of a long-term thing, something that we're not going to fix immediately, or stuff that happens to be a very large change, and it kind of forces you to think about it more, to do more like pre-planning. And encourages, I think, a little bit more debate and that kind of thing. So I've done a few of these. The first one I did was the production loader. And I believe I talked about this maybe like back at the end of last year. So anyways, I created an RFC for this. We've done a lot of discussion about it. I think discussion's gone fairly well. And most people seem to like the idea overall. Let me just talk a little bit about what it is. So currently, there's not a huge difference between Steel.js that you use in development and the Steel.production.js that you use in production. There is the biggest difference is that the production version will load bundles instead of loading individual JavaScript files, which is obviously the biggest thing that you want from a production loader. But otherwise, internally, it does all the same stuff that regular Steel does. And some of those things that the regular Steel does is stuff you don't really necessarily need to happen in production. It's a little bit more expensive for those kinds of things to happen. Like one thing it does is it kind of resolves all module names, dynamically resolves all these module names. And during the build, we know the name of every single module that exists in the build. We know all those names. We don't really need to do that work in production, but we still do it. The other problem is that Steel.js has a lot of like development features built in. It has the npm plugin and has a lot of things that are great for like the maintainability aspects of Steel, and those all get packaged into the Steel production loader as well, which kind of makes the size of it a lot more than what you need. So yeah, this RFC is about having a much smaller production loader, a production loader that just has the absolute minimum of what is actually necessary to load production code. So it has the ability to load bundles, and it has the ability to, what else does it? It has the ability to load bundles, to dynamically load bundles, but what it doesn't have is it doesn't have like all the different types of configuration. Steel is highly configurable. The production loader would not have that. Instead, all of that stuff kind of has to be worked out during the build process. So this is the RFC for it. One really nice feature that I want to add to this is the ability to use asynchronous scripts. So in case you don't know, an asynchronous script, if you have scripts like this, what this will do is it will load these in parallel. And what I mean is it'll fetch them in parallel and execute them in parallel. So it's possible that bundle A could execute before this prod.js, or bundle B. They could execute in any particular order. So it's kind of it kind of is the most most efficient, maybe. Maybe that's not true. It's very efficient for the fact that you can kind of just put all these scripts on the page and not really worry about what order they're going to load. The production loader will have a little shim to it that will have the ability for it to figure out when everything has loaded and to know to actually start executing the modules. So anyways, this is the production loader RFC. The reason why I'm bringing it up today is that as part of the RFC process, which I pretty much copied this from Ember. But part of the process is that, you create a pull request with your RFC. We talk about it, try to build consensus. And then after a while, when discussions kind of, reach the point where there is consensus, it reaches a last final comment period, which is 7 days. So I've kind of marked this one as being in the final comment period. So we have another 7 days to talk about this one. If anyone has major objections, we can kind of go through that. But if everything is looking good, then we'll merge this RFC. Which all that means is that we've kind of come to consensus that this is a good thing. This is something that we would like to see implemented. It doesn't mean that it's going to be implemented, anytime soon necessarily. That's that's determined by normal business needs and that kind of thing. But it's something that we've kind of said, we put a stamp on that says this is good. So yes, I'll link to that. So that anyone can look at that. So that is that one. Does anyone have anything to say about that, or should I go on?
No, I think it's great. I'll also make sure to when we start going through the final phases for RFCs, make sure to tweet about it and post it in our Gitter and kind of promote it a little bit more.
Yeah, I did tweet it from the Steel account this morning.
Oh, cool.
I never did Twitter. What's that?
I said I'm behind on Twitter today, so.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I'll post it to Gitter as well.
Sweet. Yeah, I think following this model is really helpful. We have an issue open for implementing the RFC process for the rest of our DoneJS projects. So seeing it be successful in Steel is hopefully a good path to having it adopted for everything else. And that RFC looks awesome. So,
well, thank you.
Did anyone else have any comments before we move on to the next topic?
It looks like a really good approach. I can't wait for it to be on the other projects.
For sure. Anyone else? Cool. All right. Matthew, you're next.
Yay, me. Finally my turn. I was just like, when is it going to be my turn? Okay, cool. So the other topic is about observable list templating. So there was an article posted, actually it was posted yesterday, by Yehuda Katz. He's one of the core developers of Ember. And he posted an article, kind of a technical article about how their view engine works. It's called Glimmer. They just kind of released this in the last few weeks. But yeah, he released an article with just enough detail about it, about how it works to kind of intrigue me as kind of an interesting idea. And I did a bunch more research and looked stuff up, and I feel like I have a decent understanding of how their templating works, which I find it to be somewhat interesting, kind of a cool idea. So I guess I want to talk about it mostly for so I can kind of work it out in my own brain a little bit to understand it even better. But yeah, I feel like I have a high level understanding, and I just wanted to share the idea. So I did post an issue to CanJS about this, and I've been thinking about how could, or backing up, not whether we should necessarily do this, but kind of if we were to do it, how would it work kind of within our own system. So I posted an issue to CanJS, which kind of goes over my thoughts. There's a gist. So I'm going to try to explain it the best way I possibly can. And so one of the cool aspects of this engine is that it separates out kind of getting, think about a template. Here, let me see if I have an example of a template. Think about this small template. These are all values that we place into the template, whether it's the condition here or just putting this text into the page. So what Glimmer does is it separates out the parts that get the value to put in the template from the parts that kind of that cache the value or keep the value in a place that think about like cache invalidation. It invalidates that value that says, hey, we need to get this value again. It kind of makes those be separate things. So I created a drawing here to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about and how these different approaches work. The first part up here, this is how CanJS works. It's very much a simplification, but I think it's completely true. And a lot of other observable-based systems work the same way. So you ever heard the term key value observables, KVO? That's kind of what CanJS is. We have an observable object, and properties on that object are observable. Whenever those properties change, they fire events that say, "Hey, this thing's changed." And in the case of CanJS, computes literally have an event called change. And that's how our template works, is that we have these observable objects, and these objects have kind of two responsibilities. They have the responsibility to hold the value, so they think about like a compute. A compute has a value, and then they also have a responsibility to cache that value. In other words, like a compute will only run its function to get its value when something inside of it changes, right? Because a compute is made up of dependencies on other computes or other observable types. So when anything inside of the compute changes, it has to rerun the function for the compute. But the responsibility of an observable layer is to make sure that all of that happens in the most minimal way possible. So that's how our system works. We have these key value observables, and the view knows about these types. Like it directly knows that everything inside of the view is an observable. In order to update, like this example that I gave, in order to update name, it's going to listen to the name event on that view model. When that event fires, it gets that new value, and it's able to directly do that. So that's how the update system works in the observable model. Okay, so this sounds pretty good, and it definitely is good. But there's the kind of some downsides to this, is that there's a lot of work involved. You've heard everyone's heard the joke. What are the two hard things in computer science? Cache invalidation and naming things. And the joke is that naming things is another one of the hard things. But the flip side of that is cache invalidation is an actual very hard thing. And we've definitely experienced this in CanJS. Is the observable system is essentially, it's a way to cache values. That's exactly what it is. I think maybe it might have been just a couple of weeks ago that Justin was talking about how he has like the different queues and stuff inside of can event, and a big difficulty in our system is making sure that all of the events fire in the correct order, so that everything updates in the correct order. Because that's the thing about caching, is once a value is cached, it's not invalidated. It has to be, if everything we're running in the right order, you might get a wrong value from the cache. So that's kind of the downside. There's a lot of work involved, and there's a lot of complexity to making it all work. So what Glimmer does, and what kind of this idea does, is that it separates these things out. So instead of observables, you just have data. So a data is a type. It could be any type. It might even be an observable, which is interesting. So a data is an object which holds a value, and the view gets the value from that data, but it handles the caching itself. So all we did is we moved the caching layer out of the observable object, and we moved it over into the view layer. So what this means is that your data types might not necessarily contain their own caching layer. That they can. But they don't have to. Like the view doesn't use that caching layer. The view has its own internal mechanism for knowing when data is stale. And the other part of that is that you have like kind of a change notification. By the way, these shapes don't mean anything, because I don't know what the shapes are supposed to represent. I just picked a shape that looked good to me. But anyways, so what there is data can change just like an object can change. You change foo.bar, already changed the value of foo.bar, and that you're just changing the value of an object or the value of a property. And so separately from that, there is like some type of mechanism that tells the view, hey view, something's changed. It's up to you to like figure out what changed. Like it doesn't, we don't tell the view, hey, the bar property changed. You need to update bar in the template. We just say, hey, something changed. It's up to you to figure it out, because the view is actually responsible for caching. So they have a really cool way of implementing this. Basically, they have like a tagging system to where anytime a property changes, they tag that property with like an incremented number. So inside the view layer, they're able to like compare the last number to the current number, and if the current number is bigger, that means something must have changed, and they know to get the new value. So that's kind of how it works in the highest level, is that the caching layer is moved into the view. The view just does, it kind of starts from the very top of the tree, and it works its way down, and whenever it reaches like a section where the cache, the value has not changed, it can kind of stop. So that's one of the kind of neat things about this system, is that it is able to do less work in some cases. In some cases, it might actually do a little bit more work, but in some cases, a lot of cases, it will do less work. So like in this example, think about stash using observables and events. Let's say that admin or is admin and name both change at the same time in a single batch. What's going to happen in stash is that it's going to update name and it's going to update is admin. So, but what happens if is admin becomes falsy? Well, we don't actually need to update name at all, right? But we do that in stash because they're kind of separated. The updating the template is separate. There's not like a top-down approach to it. In this approach, there is a top-down. You kind of start from the top of the template, you work your way down and see what parts of it are stale. So once you see that is admin is now falsy, we kind of don't have to go any further down. We don't have to update name because we don't need to.
Sorry to interrupt you, Matthew. Just wanted to clarify. So what you're saying is like if the name property changes on the observable, then stash will immediately update the DOM, and then if is admin in the same batch becomes false, then it'll already have done that extra work of updating name, even though it's not going to need to be shown anymore. Is that correct?
Well, I think that's correct. Well, let me clarify that. I'm separating out update. I'm thinking more about updating the value of name, not necessarily updating the DOM. Now, okay. I'm pretty sure what you said is correct, though. I'm pretty sure that if is admin becomes false, that we do kind of update the name text node anyways. We might not, because if is admin runs first, then we might have already torn this down and we don't ever actually update this. So it might be possible. It actually might be possible that we don't do this work if things happen. If things happen to happen in the correct order, if you know what I mean. If name gets torn down, we're no longer bound to name, so we don't actually try to update name. So that would just be if these things kind of happen in that particular order, which they might. Maybe they do happen. I'm not sure. That's a good thing. Maybe Justin has a thought on that. But in this system, I'm describing because you go the top down, you kind of know that you're going to do stuff in that order. Okay. Trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to talk about here. Yeah, so there's advantages and disadvantages. Advantage to this, like I said, is that kind of you don't have to worry about keeping the caching layer for your data. The caching layer is inside of the view. But the downside of that is that the view only knows about like its own internal cache, so it's possible that you could get a value multiple times. So you think about like if you have two computes, if you have an A which is a getter, and you have a B, which is also a getter, and B gets A. Well, if both of those things become, if A becomes invalid, then we might get A, but then when we go to get B, we're going to get A twice because, these things are not cached observables. These are just like, regular function calls, basically. So it's possible that you can do a little bit more work. There might be mechanisms for kind of preventing this, but because the caching layer is not tied to the type, there's no like guarantee that you're only going to get A once, if that makes sense. So that's one of the downsides. So it's kind of, you think about it. If you think about other popular frameworks like React. Well, React has no guarantees about caching your data. Like React reruns this render function. It recreates the DOM every time, and it works by recreating the DOM every time and then diffing the DOM. So the data layer is not cached. Now you cache the data layer yourself, right? Is that if you get a list of to-dos, you cache that list in your component's internal state, and the next time the render function works, you check to see, do I already have to-dos? So that way you don't like continually do that same operation over and over. So it kind of works that way. Ours works by, of course, caching at the data layer, and I think it's kind of interesting how this system works. Is that it's kind of a halfway between the two. You don't recreate the DOM every time. You create the DOM once, and then you kind of operate on comparing these revision dates for the different properties. Okay, I think I've talked enough. I just wanted to go over that. Yeah, just to throw it out there as a thing. I'm not really suggesting that we this. I'm not suggesting that we drop everything we do and switch to this, but I think it's kind of an interesting approach and something we could start looking more into and talking about. So yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate your explanation. I had read through, right before the meeting, I'd quickly read through the articles and the comments in that GitHub issue. But your explanation was helpful too. So thanks for going through that.
No problem.
And yeah, as we get into a post DoneJS 1.0 release world, this sort of thing is going to hopefully inform our conversations about templating a lot more.
Yeah, if we wind up doing a new templating language like we've talked about, it would be nice to at least like bring the possibility of something like this, into consideration.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone else have any comments or questions about what Matthew talked about?
I guess, will this will be more performant, or is it just like an organizational benefit?
That's a really good question. I would say I don't know for sure if it would be more performant. I would think that it would probably be more performant on kind of the initial render. That's one of the problems that we have, is the initial render is a little bit more slow because there's a lot of setup process involved and a lot of binding to properties and that kind of thing. You think about one thing I didn't mention, but you think about some bindings on your page. Like, I had this name property, but a lot of the time those absolutely never change, right? A lot of times, you have company name. Well, company name is not actually changing. I'm not sure if most, but many properties in a view are not dynamic. They don't ever change. With this, you get the value once, you get it from an object, and that's it. There's no binding set up. There's nothing that happens. So it's a little bit. It would almost definitely be faster on initial render. Update is a little bit more unknown, I would say, but it could possibly be faster. But I think it would be close at least. I don't see how it would be less performant. I'll just say that.
So what's the motivation for you to want to implement this?
Well, I didn't say I do want to implement it.
So it's just looking at what Glitter's doing?
Yeah, I just saw the article and I was like, because I've thought a lot about rendering, and I've we talked about some of the difficulties in CanJS and the complexity with our event system, and I've thought a lot about like, is there another way? There's the two dominant ways are the KVO way that we do, and then kind of the way that React does, and those are kind of two different approaches where, well, they don't have an event model system because they diff every time, and that's how they get around needing that. So kind of in my mind that those were the only possible ways, and this is kind of a middle ground way. It's a way to do things the way we do, which is only render your view once, but still update that view without needing kind of an event system. So yeah, motivation for me was just curiosity, interest.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other
I was just going
questions
to
or
say,
comments?
if I'm not mistaken, like this would allow us to do sort of a hybrid approach as well. Like you said that there's those certain situations where this could be a little bit less performant because we'd be recalculating, for example, those two getters that are dependent on each other. In those cases, we'd actually be able to sort of delegate that caching to the observable values as opposed to keeping that caching in the view, perhaps. And so like you were saying, like the React approach and our approach, like the KVO approach, are kind of all or nothing. Whereas this, we could kind of do a hybrid of KVO and sort of this approach.
Yeah, one cool aspect of this is that because the view doesn't expect a specific type of its view model, that you could have different types of view models. You could do like a flux approach where you just like keep state in one place, and every time that state changes, you rerun the view. And the view is just going to do its own validation stuff internally, which is going to be a little bit more expensive, probably. But you could do that in one view, and then another view, you could have an observable model. You could have an observable, and the observable fires change events, and it does all the normal stuff. Because the view doesn't really care about the type, you can kind of do multiple things.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for the explanation. It was enlightening. I looked at those articles as well, and a little bit of it was lost on me. So.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said, I've only spent a day on this, so like this is my best understanding currently. There's probably wrong parts too.
Cool. Any other questions or comments? Nope. Okay, did I miss any topics or? Yeah, I think we're good. Did anyone have anything before we took off for the day? Nope. Cool. All right. Thanks for everyone who's watching on the live stream or on YouTube afterwards. Thank you guys for joining, and see you in a week. Bye.
Bye.